The Knights of the Cross by Henryk Sienkiewicz. Thank you for every activity under the video. It really helps. Chapter 39. Jurand was about to say, "I am the Lord of Spykow," but he restrained himself, feeling that conversation could not be carried on in the presence of others. He asked them instead whether they had any letters, and when they replied that they were ordered to communicate verbally, he gave orders to drive as fast as the horses could go. Zbyszko was equally anxious to hear news of Danusia, and could not turn his attention to anything else. He became impatient when the guards on the dike stopped them twice, and when the bridge was lowered over the moat, behind which rose on the mound a gigantic palisade, and although he had previously often desired to see that castle of ominous fame, at the mention of which the Germans made the sign of a cross, now he saw nothing but the Teuton messengers, from whom he might hear where Danusia was and when she would be set at liberty. He did not foresee, though, that a great disappointment was awaiting him. Besides the horsemen who were given for defense and the driver, the embassy from Szczytno was composed of 2 persons. One of these was the same woman who had once brought the healing balsam to Forest Court. The other was a young Pontnik. Zbyszko did not recognize the woman, because he had not seen her at the Forest Court. The Pontnik at once seemed to him to be a disguised warrior. Jurand soon led both into the neighboring room and halted before them, huge and almost terrible in the glow of the fire, which fell upon him from the logs burning in the chimney. "Where is the child?" he asked, but they were frightened, standing face to face with a menacing man. Although the Pontnik had an insolent face, he simply trembled like a leaf, and the woman's legs trembled also. She glanced from Jurand to Zbyszko, and then at the shining bald head of the priest Caleb, and then again at Jurand, as if inquiring what the other 2 were doing there. "Sir," she said finally, "we do not know what you are asking, but we were sent to you on important matters. Yet the one who sent us ordered us explicitly that the conversation should be held without witnesses." "I have no secrets from these," said Jurand. "But we have, noble lord," replied the woman, "and if you order them to remain, then we shall ask for nothing but that you allow us to leave tomorrow." Anger appeared in Jurand's face, as he was not used to opposition. For a moment his tawny moustache worked ominously, but he reflected, "For Danusia's sake," and restrained himself. Moreover, Zbyszko, who wanted above all things that the conversation might be concluded as soon as possible, and felt sure that Jurand would repeat it to him, said, "If it must be so, then remain alone." And he left, together with the priest Caleb, but he scarcely found himself in the main hall, in which were hanging targets and weapons, captured by Jurand when Glowacz approached him. "Sir," he said, "that is the same woman." "What woman?" "From the Teutons, who brought the balsam. I recognized her at once, and so did Sandaris. She came, as it seems, to spy, and she certainly knows now where the lady is." "And we shall know," said Zbyszko. "Do you also know that Pontnik?" "No," replied Sandaris, "but do not buy, sir, any remissions from him, because he is a false Pontnik. If you put him to the torture, you might obtain a lot of information." "Wait," said Zbyszko. Meanwhile, in the next room hardly had the doors closed behind Zbyszko and the priest Caleb, when the sister of the order quickly approached Jurand and whispered, "Robbers captured your daughter." "With crosses on their robes?" "No, but God blessed the pious brethren, so that they recovered her, and now she is with them." "Where is she, I ask?" "Under the care of the religious brother Schomberg," she answered, crossing her hands on her breast and bowing humbly. But Jurand, hearing the dreadful name of the hangman of Witold's children, turned as pale as linen. After a moment he sat on a bench, shut his eyes, and began to wipe away the cold perspiration which collected in beads on his forehead. Seeing this, the Pontnik, although he had not hitherto been able to restrain his fear, now put his hands on his hips, lounged on the bench, stretched out his legs, and looked at Jurand, with eyes full of pride and scorn. A long silence followed. "Brother Markward also assists Brother Schomberg in guarding her," again said the woman. "It is a vigilant watch, and no harm will happen to the lady." "What am I to do in order to get her back?" inquired Jurand. "To humble yourself before the order," proudly said the Pontnik. At this Jurand arose, went up to him, and bending down over him, said in concentrated, terrible tones, "Be silent." and the Pontnik was again terror-stricken. He knew that he could threaten and say what would tame and overwhelm Durand, but he was terrified lest before saying a word, something dreadful would happen to him. He therefore remained silent with dilated eyes, as if petrified with fear, fixed on the threatening face of the Lord of Spykow, and sat motionless. Only his beard began to quiver with agitation. Durand again turned to the sister of the order. "Have you a letter?" "No, sir. We have no letter. What we have to say, we were ordered to say verbally." "Then speak." And she repeated again, as if wishing that Durand should impress it well in his memory. "Brother Schomberg and Brother Markward watch over the lady. Therefore you, sir, restrain your anger. But no evil will happen to her, because although you have gravely injured the order for many years, nevertheless the brethren wish to repay you good for evil if you comply with their just demands." "What do they wish?" "They wish you to release Herr von Bergau." Durand breathed heavily. "I will return von Bergau to them," he said, "and the other prisoners that you have in Spykow. There are 2 retainers of Meiniger and von Bergau, besides their boys. You must release them, sir, and make amends for the imprisonment." "God forbid that I should bargain for my child." "The religious friars expected that from you," said the woman, "but this is not all that I was ordered to say. Your daughter, sir, was captured by some men, undoubtedly robbers, and certainly for the purpose of demanding a rich ransom. God permitted the brethren to recapture her, and now they demand nothing but the return of their brother and associate. But the brethren know, and you too, sir, what hatred there is in this country against them, and how unfairly even their most righteous actions are judged. For this reason the brethren are sure that, if the people here found out that your daughter was with them, they would at once begin to suspect that they had captured her, and would consequently utter only slander and complaints. Oh yes, evil and malicious people here have frequently repaid them so, and the reputation of the Holy Order has suffered greatly by it, and the brethren are greatly concerned about it, and therefore they add this sole condition, that you alone assure the prince of this country and all the mighty knights that it is true, that not the Teutonic Knights but robbers carried off your daughter, and that you had to ransom her from robbers." "It is true," said Durand, "that bandits have captured my child, and that I have to buy her back from bandits. You shall tell nobody otherwise, because if only one person should find out that you come to terms with the brethren, if only one living soul, or only one complaint were sent to the master or the assembly, great complications would ensue." Durand's face exhibited great alarm. At the first moment it seemed to him quite natural that the knights required secrecy, fearing responsibility and disgrace. But now a suspicion arose in his mind that there might be another reason, but, not being able to account for it, he was seized with such terror as sometimes happens to the most courageous when danger does not threaten them alone, but also their relatives and loved ones. He determined, however, to find out more from the order's servant. "The knights wish secrecy," he said, "but how can it be kept when I release von Bergau and the others in return for my child? You will say that you accepted ransom for von Bergau in order to be able to pay the robbers. People will not believe it, because I never accepted ransom," gloomily replied Durand. "But your child was never in question," hissed the messenger in reply. And again silence followed, after which the Pontnik, who in the meanwhile had gained courage, and judged that Durand must now restrain himself more, said, "Such is the will of the brethren Schomberg and Markward." The messenger continued, "You will say that this Pontnik who came with me brought you the ransom. We also will leave here with the noble von Bergau and the prisoners." "How so?" said Durand, frowning. "Do you think that I will give up the prisoners before you return my child? You can act, sir, still differently. You can call personally for your daughter at Szczytno, whither the brethren will bring her to you." "I? At Szczytno?" "Because, should the bandits capture her again on the way, your and your people's suspicion would again fall upon the pious knights, and therefore they prefer to give her into your own hands. And who will pledge himself for my return, if I walk alone into a wolf's throat? The virtue of the brethren, their justice and godliness." Durand began to walk up and down the room. He began to suspect treason and feared it, but he felt at the same time that the Teutons could impose any conditions they pleased upon him, and that he was powerless before them. However, an idea struck him, and suddenly halting before the Pontnik, he gazed at him with a piercing look, and then turned to the messenger and said, "Well, I will go to Szczytno. You and this man, who is wearing Pontnik garb, will remain here until my return, after which you will leave with von Bergau and the prisoners." "Do you refuse, sir, to believe friars?" said the Pontnik. "How then can they trust you to liberate us and von Bergau on your return?" Durand's face turned pale with fury, and a critical moment followed, in which it almost seemed that he would catch the Pontnik by the throat and dash him to the floor. But he suppressed his anger, drew a deep breath, and commenced to speak slowly but emphatically. "Whoever you are, do not strain my patience to the breaking point." But the Pontnik turned to the sister. "Speak, what you were ordered." "Lord," she said, "we would not dare distrust your oath upon your sword and knightly honor, but it is not proper for you to swear before people of low rank, and we were not sent for your oath." "What were you sent for?" "The brethren told us that, without saying anything to anybody, you must appear at Szczytno with von Bergau and the prisoners." At that, Durand's shoulders began to draw together, and his fingers to extend like the claws of a bird of prey. At last, stopping before the woman, he bent down as if to speak into her ear, and said, "Did they not tell you that I should order you and von Bergau to be broken on the wheel in Spykow? Your daughter is in the power of the brethren, and under the care of Schomberg and Markward," replied the sister meaningly. "Robbers, poisoners, hangmen," burst forth Durand. "Who are able to avenge us, and who said at our departure, 'Should he not comply with all our orders, it would be far better that the girl should die, as Witold's children died. Choose.'" "And understand that you are in the power of the knights," remarked the Pontnik. "They do not wish to do you any harm, and the Starosta of Szczytno sends you his word by us that you shall go free from his castle. But they want you, for the wrong done to them, to present your respects to the Teuton and beg for the victor's mercy. They want to forgive you, but they first wish to bend your stubborn neck. You denounce them as traitors and perjurers. Therefore they want you to acknowledge their good faith. They will restore you and your daughter to liberty, but you must beg for it. You trampled upon them. Now you must swear that your hand will never be raised against the white robe." "The knights wish it so," added the woman, and Markward and Schomberg with them. A moment of death-like silence followed. It seemed only that somewhere among the beams of the ceiling some smothered echo repeated as if in terror, "Markward, Schomberg." Outside the windows could be heard the voices of Durand's archers keeping watch on the mounds near the palisade of the castle. The Pontnik and the servant of the order looked for a long time at each other, and Durand, who sat leaning against the wall, motionless, and with a face deeply shadowed by furs suspended by the window. His brain contained only one thought, that, if he did not do what the Teutons demanded, they would destroy his child. Again, if he should do it, he might perhaps even then not save Danusia nor himself. And he saw no help, no way of escape. He felt a pitiless superior force over him, which was crushing him. He saw in his soul already the iron hands of a Teuton on Danusia's throat. Knowing them thoroughly, he did not doubt for a moment that they would kill her, bury her in the castle yard, and then deny it, and who would then be able to prove that they had captured her? It was true that Durand had the messengers in his power. He could bring them to the prince and get a confession by means of torture, but the Teutons had Danusia, and they might not care about their agent's torture. And for a moment he seemed to see his child stretching out her hands from afar, asking for assistance. If he at least knew that she was really at Szczytno, then he could go that very night to the border, attack the unsuspecting Germans, capture the castle, destroy the garrison, and liberate the child, but she might not be, and positively was not in Szczytno. It flashed like lightning through his head, that if he were to seize the woman and the Pontnik, and take them directly to the Grand Master, then perhaps the master could draw confessions from them and might order the return of his daughter. But that gleam was extinguished almost as quickly as it took fire. These people could tell the master that they came to ransom von Bergau and that they knew nothing about a girl. No, That way led to nothing, but what did? He thought that should he go to Szczytno, they would chain him and cast him underground, while Danusia would not be released, lest it should transpire that they had captured her, if for no other reason. And meanwhile death hung over his only child, death over the last dear head. And finally his thoughts grew confused, and the pain became so great that it overpowered itself and became numbness. He sat motionless, for his body became as dead as if cut out of stone. If he wanted to rise now, he would not be able to do so. Meanwhile the others grew tired of the long waiting. Therefore the servant of the order arose and said, "It will be soon daylight, therefore permit us, sir, to retire, because we need a rest." "And refreshment after the long journey," added the Pontnik. Then they both bowed to Durand and went out, but he continued to sit motionless, as if seized by sleep or death. Presently, however, the door opened, and Zbyszko appeared, followed by the priest Caleb. "Who are the messengers? What do they want?" inquired the young knight, approaching Durand. Durand quivered, but at first answered nothing. He only began to blink like a man awakened from a sound sleep. "Sir, are you not ill?" said the priest Caleb, who, knowing Durand better, noticed that something curious was taking place within him. "No," replied Durand. "And Danusia?" further inquired Zbyszko. "Where is she, and what did they say to you? What did they bring?" "The ransom," slowly replied Durand. "The ransom for von Bergau." "For von Bergau? How so for von Bergau? What is the matter with you?" "Nothing." But in his voice there was something so strange and listless that a sudden fear seized those two, especially because Durand spoke of the ransom and not the exchange of von Bergau for Danusia. "Gracious God!" exclaimed Zbyszko. "Where is Danusia?" "She is not with the Teutons." "No," replied Durand in a sleepy tone, and suddenly he fell from the bench on the floor as if dead.
Remember to subscribe.